Hi, everyone. I'm just going to welcome you one more time for the recording. This is our environmental careers panel for our social science team hosted by the Career Center as well as the social science advising team. So we just want to welcome you all. We have about 4 panelists here to talk about their careers and their journey to get to them. So we hope you get a lot of good information tonight as well as can have some time to ask your questions. I'm going to turn it over to Susan, who's going to be our moderator for tonight.
Hello, everybody. Good to have all of you online tonight for this panel. I think it's going to be a great opportunity to just learn from some people in the environmental field as to how they got their start, what they're currently doing, what their organizations are doing. So that's the main purpose, is just to learn from other people in the field in terms of their opportunities in their career path, as well as other opportunities that may exist within their organizations. So we invite your questions and participation. As Samantha said, if you have a question, feel free to type it in the chat and she will bring it up at the appropriate point. But I want to get started with just asking each of our presenters tonight to just give an overview of what organization they're with, what their role is, how they kind of got to that position. So I work, and I should have introduced in a more fuller way, I work with Sean McNamara, or actually I work for Sean McNamara, who is a career director over CLASS, the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences, as well as College of Science. So he really meets, I know, with a lot of you in the geography field, GIS, those types of things. I also meet with students who are in environmental sciences, ecology. And so it's such a growing and important field. And I know a lot of you have a lot of passion about what you're doing. And I know that our speakers tonight will help also kind of make you feel that this is an important field and there's a lot of great things to be done here. So I'd like to ask Katie, if she could, to just tell us, Katie, what is it that you do with City of Dallas? How did you get to that position? What do you think students should know about your current role and how you got there?
Sure, thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me. My name is Katie Evans. I am a climate coordinator with the City of Dallas, and that doesn't mean I control the weather. It means I work on the city's climate initiatives. So back in May of last year, the city passed its first ever Comprehensive Environmental and Climate Action Plan, or CCAP. And CCAP is a massive plan for over 30 years to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to also prepare for the coming impacts of climate change. So to try to curb climate change while also preparing for climate change and addressing environmental justice and historical equity issues when it comes to the environment in the city of Dallas. And so my role with the city is to implement this plan. So like I said, 30-year plan, lots to do. So great job security for me. I'm working on a few really neat projects this year, like a community solar project at a former landfill. We're working on a study to electrify the city's fleet, meaning getting electric vehicles instead of natural gas or diesel or regular gasoline vehicles, things like that, an urban agriculture plan, lots of really neat projects coming up. The way I got here is kind of roundabout, and I see there's a question about the climate plan. I will certainly link to that in the chat. But the way I got here is I have about 12 years of local government experience. I got my master's in public health from the University of Florida, and I had a concentration in environmental health. And so I started as a health inspector for the city of Grand Prairie. It's a long story how I ended up in Grand Prairie from Gainesville, Florida, but we don't have time for that. So that's how I got my start in local government, and I loved it. I went from health inspections to environmental compliance and enforcement, doing stormwater and wastewater inspections. Eventually, I became a public health and sustainability manager for City of Farmers Branch, where I was for 8 years. And during that time, I got to work with all different facets of local government. Everything from a landfill, management of a landfill, to solid waste and recycling collection services, to pool inspections, to mosquito control, you name it. If it was environmental or public health, I did it. And so that really robust generalist work that I did, having a little bit of experience all over the place in that role, really made me a good fit for this climate coordinator position that I've been in for about a year. And so I bring an interesting perspective to the team, having that public health background, because climate change is a public health issue. And additionally, having that knowledge of how city government works has been really helpful. So it's truly a combination of my experience and my education that have come together to make me a good fit for this role. I also have a passion for ecology and social issues. And so it all really just fits together nicely for what I'm doing with the city of Dallas.
That is really inspiring how you've brought all those pieces together. So thank you, Katie.
It is luck. Thank you.
What did you say?
Oh, I got very lucky that it all kind
Oh.
of worked out. So it's a combination of luck and just being, in the right roles so far.
That's life, a combination of all of that. Let's move on to Cynthia Ortiz, who is with LULAC. And Cynthia, if I've mispronounced your name, please correct me. But we'd love to hear more about your journey and your position.
Yeah, of course. My name is Cynthia Ortiz. I graduated just about a year ago when the world shut down. I graduated with a bachelor in geography and minor in business analytics and a GIS certificate. And I'm currently right now I'm an environmental justice fellow for LULAC, which is the oldest and largest Latino organization. And in that space, I'm working with, leading the environmental justice portfolio. So that means advocating or helping people advocate for different environmental legislation, tracking legislation at the federal level and state level. So meeting with members of Congress virtually and allowing people on the ground being able to share their stories with members of Congress as to share their experiences, why we need changes in environmental policy, climate policy, for example, and with more of a focus on Latino populations as well. As an undergrad, I realized that I really cared about the space and the environmental space and climate space, but something that was very important to me was my identity and being able to do something for my community and being able to kind of bring that to the forefront of the conversation. And we see that now with the new things that are happening with bringing environmental justice to the forefront of climate justice and so on.
Such important work. Thank you, Cynthia. Let's go to Logan. Logan Clements is with NEON and a wildlife ecologist, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with NEON, but Logan, if you could give us an overview of what you do with NEON, and maybe for those of us who maybe aren't as familiar with NEON, what that means and what that organization does.
Yeah, so I'm Logan Clements. I'm sorry I do not have my camera on. We're actually driving back from doing some field work right now. And so I would just be very shaky and make you nauseous anyway. So yes, I am a freshwater field ecologist with NEON. And so NEON stands for National Ecological Observatory Network. So we are nationwide and fully funded by the National Science Foundation. The country is split into 20 different ecoregions, which include Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico. Here in Texas and southeastern Oklahoma, we are domain 11 for the Southern Plains. And so we've got some terrestrial sites and aquatic sites as well. Our two aquatic sites in our domain are Pringle Creek, which is out in Decatur, and then Blue River in Oklahoma. It's actually on the DNC managed Okeechobee Nature Preserve, and that's where I'm driving back from today. So my job includes doing physical, chemical, and biological sampling at these aquatic ecosystems. And they're scheduled throughout the year, mostly based on seasonality, but with aquatics, you also have to consider like hydrology, which does have some like seasonal components to it. And so we're really intensely sampling biological components right now. And in addition to field sampling, I also have some administrative duties, so like QCing data and writing tickets, because nothing ever goes right when you're in the field. So there's a lot of problem solving, and then letting the powers that be up in Science HQ know if we had any issues, what we had issues with, how we solved them, or if we need help solving them. And so I got into this position. I actually graduated from UNT twice over. My first degree was interdisciplinary studies. I studied mathematics and education, and I taught for a couple of years. And just could not stand being stuck inside. And so I went 3 years ago. Yes, 3 years ago at this point. And so my degree,
Logan, your audio is really getting spotty.
much experience as I could, working in some grad students with their research. And then just taking any type of job outside that I could. So I did trail construction for a while, and I did some plant restoration. There now. Okay. Experience in the field as I could, sampling technician, and then started my second season with Neon as an aquatic seasonal technician, and then a full-time position opened up. And so I was able to shift into an FE1 position. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Logan. You were breaking up a little bit, but I think what we heard was very interesting and inspiring. So let's go to Louisa. Louisa Torrance is with Texas Parks and Wildlife and a distance learning coordinator, which I'd love to know more about personally. It sounds like one of those positions that possibly going forward, is it going to be even more important given we've had some shifts in workplace learning and work and even consumer education and so forth as a result of the events of the past year. But Louisa, I'm going to turn it over to you to tell us a little more about yourself and your role with Texas Parks and Wildlife.
Sure, thank you. And it's also exciting for me to get to meet this panel as well, and all the interesting work and reasons why people landed in these jobs. So I guess to just start kind of where y'all are at right now, I graduated from UT Austin, and I got my degree in marine biology, and I also got a teaching certification. So I knew that I wanted to teach after I graduated. While I was an undergraduate, I was super lucky to find out about a program that UT runs called Bridging Disciplines, and it allows you to take classes that are outside of your major. And so I chose environmental studies, and that's where I had my first taste of the environmental sciences. Through that program, we had to do an internship, and I thought, I'm going to work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So I reached out to one of the regional managers there and asked if I could help out in any way with some of their outreach efforts, and they basically said, yeah, sure, come on in. So I got to intern with them, and that was super formative for me. I really enjoyed that. So I definitely encourage you to reach out to places that you're interested in to see if they have internship opportunities. Once I graduated, I did teach, and so I taught 8th grade science for 4 years and put a lot of environmental focused activities and field trips into those 4 years. I could have been a career-long teacher. It was a really tough decision for me. But after 4 years, I decided I wanted to continue my education. So I went to A&M Corpus Christi and got my master's in natural resource sciences, specifically fisheries. So I was looking at freshwater inflow and how it affected red drum populations down there. So the way I got into Texas Parks and Wildlife is through volunteering. I really wanted to do something in addition to the academics that I was working on as a master's student, and found out about this amazing program through state parks, which was called the Ambassador Program. And I was partnered with Mustang Island State Park and basically had 6 months to do a bunch of different projects with their ranger there. So we did community outreach, we did social media projects, hands-on service, and it was amazing. Like Katie, she said, you know, her paths kind of didn't just go in a straight line. You just go with whatever opportunities arise. And when I finished the ambassador program, I graduated, and it turned out that the program coordinator position had just opened. So I went straight from being an ambassador to then coordinating the program, and that was awesome. I did that position for a little over 2 years, and then recently switched over to distance learning while that program is on hiatus. And like you said, Susan, as things changed drastically in the way that we do public education. And so I love working for Texas Parks and Wildlife because we are a forward-thinking agency. Just recently, we had a work group to kind of look at the demographics of Texas and how people are using our environmental and cultural resources. And so we're seeing a big growth in Texans who want to enjoy our public lands non-consumptively. And what that means is things like bird watching, hiking, camping, versus more traditional forms of activities like hunting or fishing. And so our management wants to reflect that as well. You know, our mission begins with we manage and conserve our natural and cultural resources, but it all leads up to the end of the mission, which is for the use and enjoyment of present and future generations. And I think that really aligns with sustainability definitions. And for me, the environment and sustainability go hand in hand. So as an agency, you know, we have to ask, how do we best manage things now and for the future? You know, does it begin with habitat? Does it begin with wildlife? Does it begin with people? And the answer is it's a combo of all those things. So within our agency, you know, we have 13 different what we call divisions. One of which is wildlife, and you know they have a habitat assessment team. They have a wildlife diversity program. We do a lot of education and outreach, which is the team that I fall under. And so we're working on all those areas, habitat, wildlife, and people, so that we have a sustainable public lands system for people and all the wildlife and plants across Texas. So thinking about kind of what your strengths are can help you think of where you could fit in with an agency like Texas Parks and Wildlife. You know, we're not all just Lone Star Law or park rangers. We have several divisions, including a legal team of attorneys. I mean, there's emergency management planning. We have a chief diversity officer who looks at outdoor equity. We have a support resources team that actually has a sustainability program manager. So just thinking about, you know, am I a great writer? Do I love to be in the field? Am I really great at connecting with people? And thinking about your strengths, you can almost find any job that, you know, all of these jobs support our overall mission. And so I just think it's a great agency to work for. And I think it has a lot of places that students can find themselves loving.
Very good. Yes, I like what you brought to light about depending on your different core competencies, your different strengths. As if you have a passion in this area, there's probably going to be a place for you. And so, yeah, we have different passions, we have different strengths. But if you know conservation and environment is important, which I wish it were for every single person in the world, and I guess increasingly we're getting there, but we're not quite there yet. Depending on your own personal strengths and interests, there could be a really important niche, an important role that you can play. So I love that. I would like to ask any of the other panelists to just weigh in on what are some of the other ways to prepare? We talked a little bit about volunteering and really figuring out your core strengths and how can I apply that in a particular role within environmental sciences. But I'd love to hear from anyone on the panel in terms of what are some other ways that students can prepare themselves to not only figure out what their specific role might be in this field of environmental science, but to prepare themselves as effectively as possible to be a great candidate for a good internship or a good part-time role or a good full-time role. What, in addition to volunteering, do any of you suggest in terms of students beginning to really test the waters, prepare themselves, and build a great portfolio of skills that they can present to be considered for internships and full-time roles?
So for me, one of the things that I've used in every job I've ever been to, from being a bagger at Winn-Dixie in Florida to being climate coordinator now, is working with people. And that's kind of one of those intangible skills that you just learn over time, but being able to communicate effectively and work cooperatively on a team is the most important thing that I've done every day in all of my roles. Being able to work with everyone from a high level city council members to field crews, and being willing to get out and do the work outside of your office that other people do too. So learning from those people, not isolating yourself in your role. So I would say teamwork, working as part of a group, and learning from the people who you are working with. Those are probably the two most important things. Unfortunately, it's hard to indicate that on a resume, but I've been able to use my experience working in a deli to show that I am, I mean, when I got my first job, I didn't really have a lot of experience. So I had to kind of use whatever experience I had to show that I was able to work. So any experience you have is good. Just learn from the people around you, and don't be afraid to ask questions and get your hands dirty.
Any other panelists' comments on that? But I totally agree, and that's one thing in career services that we do. So some of you students may have met with Sean, or some of you on the call may have met with me, but there are things called soft skills, which even if you haven't had direct experience in your targeted field, there are things that transfer from job to job to job that are important, such as communication, such as teamwork. And so I agree 100% with what Katie was saying about, you know, if you've been a cashier at a grocery store, or you have done, Uber Eats delivery, what are those things that you have learned and that are going to be also important in whatever job that you are, career path you're interested in? Reliability, communications, punctuality, attention to detail. And these are things that can be highlighted on your resume as well as in an interview situation. And they're important. So don't overlook the importance of whatever you've done in terms of job experience, even if it's not directly related to the field. Anyone else want to contribute additionally to that question? Samantha, are you watching the chat? Do we have any student questions yet, or?
We don't have any student questions yet, but I do open the floor if students have questions. Start posting them, and we can definitely start calling those out if you do. Or if a student has a question and you feel comfortable asking it out loud, go right ahead.
Yeah, I would encourage you, if you're comfortable unmuting yourself and asking a question. Those are the things that, like in a professional situation, in a meeting, you want to be comfortable unmuting yourself and asking a question. And this is a safe place to do that. So feel free to do that. Or if you want to type it into chat, then Samantha will be kind of watching that. We talked a little bit in terms of using your own skills and strengths and core competencies. Would some of the panelists comment on, we've heard about what you do within your organizations. but other students who may have different competencies but are really passionate about environmental science, environmental careers, what are some other positions that either internships or kind of entry level positions that students might not know about or that you might want to make them aware of within your organizations that they might want to put on their radar screen? We always try to ask students to start thinking early in their academic career as to what are some particular positions that I think I might be a good fit for. So if any of you have some ideas for other positions within your organizations that students who have a passion in this area, who have specific skill sets other than what you've described as your own path, I'd love to hear from you about that.
Sure, I'll jump in. I mean, of course, we talk about volunteering and internships at Parks and Wildlife. That's a huge in for our agency. And volunteering is taken as seriously as any other form of employment. Within our job application, you can put volunteers work experience with a salary of 0. And that's something I think sometimes gets overlooked whenever people are applying for Parks and Wildlife. In terms of jobs that might not be well known for incoming students, we have this incredible partnership with the AmeriCorps Vista, so Volunteers in Service to America. And it doesn't feel glamorous at the time because you are being paid a very low salary since you are a volunteer in service to America. However, these 6 to 12 month positions at Parks and Wildlife are incredibly specialized and often lead directly to a position full-time with the agency. We had a wonderful Vista who was working as part of our support services team. This is a little bit different from environmental science, but just to highlight how much his work mattered, he got started in helping ADA accommodations within our agency. And he worked for 9 months as a Vista. And then once he finished, he then became a full-time employee because the work he did needed to continue. And they knew that he would do that work as a volunteer. So just imagine what he would do if he was a full-time employee. So there's always Vista positions at state parks, at headquarters in Austin to check out. I would highly recommend that program. It's really amazing. Thinking about, dipping your toes in the water, I see we have a student question in the chat, to find the best place to work. It's definitely, like I said, through volunteering and interning because you get to know the culture of the agency. You get to know what the job duties are, especially if you have a really good mentor who can teach you those kind of behind the scene things that make an agency run besides just your, knowledge, skills, and abilities. I would consider while you're, in a position like that, think about if you really want to work for or for a position that has a specific specialty, or if you want to work towards management. I think people often think that just because you're the best and brightest fisheries technician, suddenly you're going to be the program manager. But oftentimes managerial skills are different from technical skills. And if you know that you want to move into management, there's different things you might do in order to get there versus things you might do to become a really competent, specialist in one position. So I would think, how do you ask yourself, how do you want to amplify your environmental voice? Any job can have a frame of reference. And if yours is coming from environmental stewardship, think about it. Would I do more benefit by doing sampling and field work and contributing the hard data and science for the managers who are going to then put it into policy? Or is your voice more heard as a manager and saying, I'm really good at finding teams and delegating tasks and thinking long-term, that's my strength more so than going out and collecting the data. And so going into whatever position that you're going into, internship or volunteering, thinking about those two tracks, I think is something I would have liked to know when I first started my career.
Can I piggyback off of that? because I really like that you brought up the management thing, because you'll find as you go throughout your career, the further they say the further up you go, especially in environmental work, the further you get from the field, right? You spend less and less time out in the field. In the beginning, I was out stream hopping and taking water samples, and by the end, I was just managing people, and both have their benefits and their downsides. But I wanted to add to that the question about where to dip your toes in the water. Professional organizations are fantastic. There is the Society for Texas Environmental Professionals, or STEP. When we had in-person meetings, there was always a college kid or two there who said, you know, I'm graduating this semester, I'm looking for a job. And there would be people there looking for entry-level field technicians. And so a lot of times those people found jobs through those professional organizations. Networking, unfortunately, is really helpful in the private sector. I've never worked in the private sector, I've just seen it happen. But it's also helpful in local government too, because we all know each other. All of the sustainability and climate folks in North Texas, we all know each other. We just trade jobs every few years, and that's kind of how we mix things up. But networking in professional organizations is super important. Other things besides volunteering, because I know some people don't have the time or have the sometimes you need to get paid, right? So take whatever job you can get that's close to where you want to be. Right? If you can't afford to work for free, as I know some people can't, take whatever job that's close to where you want to be. That's what I did as a health inspector. I hated being a health inspector, but it kind of got my foot in the door a little bit closer to where I wanted to be eventually. I started working as a health inspector because it was the first recession. I think it was now 2 recessions ago, but at the time it was the Great Recession and there weren't a lot of options. And luckily it set me on a good path towards where I am. But yeah, professional organizations, and I can put a few of those in the chat.
Yes, if you would, that would be great. And I also would add on to that student organizations. So there's lots of professional organizations that have student chapters at UNT. We have over 400 registered student organizations at UNT. And again, as Logan was saying, you know, you can kind of carve out the amount of time, the role that you can give to that. Because one thing about UNT students, you tend to be, or all of us tend to be very busy. Like, you know, we've got people who are parents and working full time and all kinds of time challenges. And so what can you realistically do while you're completing your degree to gain some experience, to build your resume? And sometimes a professional organization or a student organization is a wonderful way of doing that because you have some flexibility. You don't have to be the president if you don't have time to do that. But it can give you some exposure to some great people in the field and some great thinking as to what's coming up, what's the latest in your field of interest. So,
if I can, I would like to add to that because I completely agree with you, Susan. As a recent graduate, a lot of the work that I have before my position right now was either internships or my involvement with organizations on campus. So, you know, take advantage, you know, UNT does, there's a lot of organizations that you can focus in on different kind of environmental issues, whether if it's like within your major or more maybe like the Women Green Fund and so forth. Like that's a great resource where you can develop an idea and implement a project on campus about sustainability and environment. And there's a direct impact on your community on campus as well. So you know, looking at those resources that are already on campus and taking advantage of them as well. And like how Susan mentioned, like you can hone in your skills in those roles. If you don't have a lot of time, you can just focus on the things that you are able to commit to the organization and so forth. And another thing I would mention, I know that either with the Career Center or with your department, being if they have like an alumni list that you can reach out to, so you can have those conversations with folks that are already in the positions that you're interested, and kind of have a conversation with them of what that field is like. I know that I reached out to a couple of folks when I was an undergrad, and they were very helpful, and they would talk to me about their day-to-day kind of activity and work and how they got there, similar to the conversation we're having right now. So you can reach out to those folks, whether if it's with your department or the career center, so you can have those conversations started. So maybe you're not able to get an internship, you can have a little bit more idea of what that work is like through a conversation.
Absolutely.
sir.
I want to add to that even more so. So, if you don't have time, if you don't have the opportunity to, take a unpaid internship, unpaid volunteer experience, to answer John's question, he has the opportunity to do an online course about sustainability through his current job at Starbucks. That's a great opportunity. If you can get some experience that you're going above and beyond, it's not just a class required for your degree plan. I think that's a great opportunity for you to kind of advance your skills, advance your knowledge, and show that you truly are passionate about what you're going into and you're taking it a step further and doing things that aren't required of you. So if you don't have that, extra time or, have those opportunities through volunteer internships, I think professional development is a great option to consider as well. We did have another good question in here that Morgan wanted to know if it's more beneficial to focus on getting experience through internships, volunteer, what have you, versus going and getting a master's degree in order to pursue a higher level position within the environmental sector.
So I'll jump in. I got a master's degree because my undergrad was in anthropology and I didn't know what I was going to do with that. I was able to do a combined degree program where I finished both my undergrad and my master's in 5 years. And so that's the main reason why I got a master's. I think if I hadn't, I probably still would have gone back later. But that's because I really enjoy going to school and learning. I mean, I really enjoyed my grad degree even more than my undergrad degree. That being said, I think it did give me a leg up as starting out in the field, being able to show that I had the master's with very little. I had a couple internships, but with very little experience. I think it did give me a leg up when I started out. It also gives me because it's different from what I do every day, it brings in that different perspective. That being said, there is no substitution for experience. Absolutely no substitution for experience. And that's why I put in the chat, all experience is valuable, no matter what it is. And so, if it depends on what you want to do, definitely if you have an idea of what you want to do, look at what other people have done to get there, see if it's worth the time and cost of a master's degree, or if that time would be better spent getting real world experience, because it really depends on what you want to do.
And just to pick up on that, just from being like a recent undergrad, I got lucky being able to find a position during the pandemic, and I'm very grateful for it. But I also see like the valuable of having this experience in my past internship experiences, because they also give you kind of like an insight of like, is this what I want to do, or do I want to change direction? And you're able to do that in your graduate studies and so forth. So I think both are completely valuable. I just think it depends on your path. Everybody's path is going to be different. As everybody on the panel, our paths are completely different. Maybe like I mentioned, I'm recent undergrad, but like I mentioned, just if you go into a position where you enjoy the work and you like the experience and so forth, or you go into grad school, I think there's nothing wrong with either, and that they're both great options. It's just being able to do the work that you want to do, and not just because you feel like you have to, but because you want to be in that space.
Yeah, agreed. And, sometimes I think there's this dichotomy between experience and master's programs, but a lot of master's programs are 2 years of experience, depending on your master's program. When I was doing fisheries science, I learned unbelievable amounts of skills that didn't just relate to, staining fish. It was also grant writing. It was going out and, creating sampling protocols. It was all of these things that I didn't have direct experience with that I gained through my master's program. And the benefit is you have this wonderful thesis at the end that you can always link to show people this is what I learned and what I contributed to this field. And so thinking about your master's program in terms of how it aligns directly with the experiences that a certain position that you may want to apply for relate to each other is really important. So I did have a different path than I originally thought. I thought that I would work in coastal fisheries with parks and wildlife, but then again, I found out about the ambassador program and went more towards the state parks path. But had I continued with coastal fisheries, right after graduation, I had 3 interviews already because I had met people within coastal fisheries through that master's program and had the experience that I needed to start with on day 1 of those jobs. So just thinking about it as it could be both for you. And it is important, like both Katie and Cynthia said, like think about the investment of your time and money so that it's worth it when you finish on graduation day. And so that would be my advice is, just think about where you want to be on graduation day and what you would have learned in those 2 years or 1 to 2 years.
Yeah, all great points. And one thing as a career coach that I'm always talking to students about is it's your path, it's your career, it's your life. It's not going to look exactly like another person's path or career or life. It's you. You're the only you, and this is your only career path. So be flexible, but be deliberate. Have vision. If you don't have a vision for where you're trying to head, work with some career people or faculty advisors to try to carve out a vision for you. Be flexible though, as one of our panelists said, she had started out in a particular role that was kind of like, well, I guess I'll go ahead and do this just because I need a job. That happens. But sometimes those jobs are stepping stones. You gain some skills, you gain some contacts into another position. And so, it is an important thing to try to really figure out your path and figure out your vision, but you're not going to, most of you will probably not get it perfect right now as you move into the workforce. It'll be a path, it'll be a quilt. But as long as you are focused on what are my key values, what do I want to accomplish in my life? Things will start to come into play. And if you don't have a great GPA, for example, because some students are great test takers, others are not so much. It doesn't mean they're not as intelligent as the great test takers. They're just not as good at taking tests. If your GPA does not reflect what you consider to be your value and your intelligence, get some internships, get some, some registered student organization experience. Those things will help very, very much make up for the fact that maybe your GPA is lower than you had gone into college anticipating it would be. GPA is just one piece of many that employers consider. So all of these things that have been discussed so far by our panelists, they all add together into making you who you are and how you're considered by organizations in terms of what you could bring to them. So, Samantha, oh yes, go ahead.
Sorry, I just said something that I also think it's important to not let any lack of experience that you have or any fears about a position or an opportunity to keep you from applying for it. A couple of my seasonal positions required me to either drive on mountain roads or on snow. Both things terrify me and I've never done before. But other aspects of the opportunities were really important to me and would allow me to develop some other skills. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go for it. I'll apply. Same thing with another outreach position that I'm a part of with my job now. And also just in my path to being in freshwater, I always thought I would be like endaphic or edaphic macroinvertebrates. Not the case. I took an aquatic toxicology elective because I didn't have any others to fill out my schedule. It was the only thing available. And, you know, I was not really sure about freshwater, and chemistry was not my strong suit. But it was an extremely cool class that like changed the course of my career, and certainly laid the groundwork for where I'm headed now. So yeah, opportunities look at both sides of it. If there is something sort of lacking in it, or you feel like you're lacking for that opportunity, don't sell yourself short on like things that you could develop or that maybe you do have a good grasp of in those opportunities.
Absolutely. You know, and I think that's one of the issues is that confidence, like have some confidence in yourself. I mean, you are a student at a tier 1 research university that's very well known for its scientific research and its science progress. And so have confidence in yourself. It can be hard at first, but you know, you've earned that. Own it, feel good about yourselves, and bring that into an interview situation. Bring it into your career search. Know that you are worthy and that you have a lot to offer. Most importantly, your passion for environment, because this is something that's so critical. We're at a critical crossroads with regard to environmental science. And so have that confidence, as Logan was saying. Do we have any other questions in the chat, Samantha?
We do, and I think we have time for one more question as our time's wrapping up here at the end of our program.
Can I actually add on to that? Sorry, I saw the question on the chat, and I had like the exact same question, but related to like econ majors. So, while you're answering that one, could you maybe tie in like?
Absolutely. Yes, Abram. Yeah. So I was definitely going to do that anyways. I think it's a great question. And I see Katie's already really excited to talk about it. So I'm going to rush through the question so we have enough time to get the answer. But we have an urban policy and planning major, and also Abram, an econ major, that are really interested in how to get into the environmental advocacy action areas. And so wondering if any of our panelists have any knowledge or work with anybody that works within the public sector that maybe isn't a geography major, isn't an ecology major, an environmental science major, something like that. And could someone coming from an urban policy and planning or an econ major or anthropology, could they do kind of what y'all do, or would they need to get kind of more information, more education along the way before they could do that?
Yes, so I got really excited about this question when I saw urban policy and planning, because that is what I want to do when I grow up. I want to, if I had the time and the money, I would go get a PhD in urban planning right now, because urban planning and policy is everything. It's everywhere. It affects every aspect of your life, and it is inextricably linked with climate and public health. And I'm super into the intersection of those things. Like, my hands are moving a lot. I get really excited. You can't see my bookshelf, but the entire first shelf right here is urban planning and policy books, because I work with city planners almost every day, because it touches every aspect of city life, and everything from zoning to sidewalks. It all ties back to climate and public health and community. So I think it is a fantastic fit for environment. And I think the American Planning Association actually has a whole committee on community and environmental health and environmental science and climate, and is working very closely with environmental people to make sure that their goals align with environmental goals. As far as econ, I actually also work with our economic development folks at the city to work with our business community to encourage them to be carbon neutral and to invest in renewable energy and to make efficiency upgrades in their buildings. So there are programs that we funnel through that department. And so we need those environmentally minded people in economic development. The other side of economics is we are in a really exciting time where sustainability efforts are part of investment portfolios. We are seeing investors looking at what are companies doing to further climate efforts and sustainability efforts, and are their business models, are they going to make sense in 30 years? So we're seeing companies make the shift from traditional internal combustion engines to electric vehicles. We're seeing directives from the Biden administration that are pushing things in that direction. So this is such an exciting time because all of these liberal arts, anthropology, poli-sci, like all of these touchy-feely things that we got shamed right when we were in undergrad because they weren't sciencey enough, they are all more important than ever, especially if you're looking at them through an environmental or climate lens, because we need folks in every single field that have that perspective on what they're doing. So these are really great questions. I think there's no field that doesn't benefit from environmental education and experience. Someone said psychology. Psychology too. We need to trick people into fixing the environment, right?
Absolutely, that's huge. It's huge. Well, Samantha, if you don't have any other burning questions in the chat that need to be addressed, I think we're pretty close to 6 o'clock. So I just want to thank Katie and Cynthia, Logan and Louisa for being here for us tonight. I feel really personally inspired. I know those of you who are getting an education right now in these areas also do. I want to go ahead and show you, let's see. That was earlier that I was supposed to. Okay, if you have a moment to copy and paste, or maybe, I don't think you can click on this because this is my screen, but if you could copy and paste this particular URL into your web browser and give us some input, that helps us continue to improve. So I thought that it was a great session, but we'd love to hear from you in terms of what our students felt or any ways that we can improve in the future. We'll probably also resend that out. In terms of how to connect with our panelists and their organizations, we're going to be following up with them and finding out what their preferred method is, whether it's LinkedIn or keep an eye on a Handshake or email your resume if you see a position of interest. It may differ by organization, but those of you who are here tonight and who have registered your attendance will be sure and share that with you also, because you'll want to stay networked and start to build out your network in the field. That's going to be really important. I think one thing I heard tonight that really struck me was how intersectional these various organizations and individuals are in terms of their missions and their goals. And so it's going to take everyone working together and really having that network and that global perspective, working as a team to really do what we need to do in environmental science careers. So thanks again to our panelists. Thanks for the students that are on the call, and everyone have a great rest of the week.